In the shadowed annals of human depravity, few names claw at the soul with such raw, gut-wrenching terror as Caligula, the Roman emperor who twisted the world's mightiest empire into his twisted carnival of slaughter, lust, and godlike madness. What unfolds before you isn't just the tale of a deranged despot, but a bone-chilling dissection of absolute power's venomous grip, how it devours a bright-eyed youth, forging him into a beast whose savagery could bring tears from the stone-hearted headsman. This is the cursed chronicle Rome clawed desperately to bury, a nightmare so profane that ancient scribes murmured it in the dead of night, half convinced that uttering his name might drag his vengeful spectre from the grave to haunt the living once more. The year was 37 AD, when Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, branded forever as Caligula, seized Rome's throne at a mere 24, his veins pulsing with the promise of glory. The empire, forged in the iron fire of legions and the cold calculus of conquest, braced for 4 feverish years of lunacy that would etch tyranny's blackest scars into eternity. What dawned as the adored heir's radiant rule plunged into a blood-soaked frenzy so savage it stunned a culture numb to the screams of the crucified and the clash of gladiators in the dust. Our lens into this abyss draws from antiquity's unyielding voices, Suetonius, whose raw, unflinching Lives of the 12 Caesars peels back the skin on Caligula's horrors with surgical intimacy, Tacitus, the silver-tongued sentinel whose piercing gaze on empire's rot stands peerless, and Cassius Dio, whose sprawling Roman history traps the eyewitness gasps of those who stared into the maelstrom and lived to shudder. These bold chroniclers staked their necks to etch the truth, driven by a fierce vow. Posterity must grasp how swiftly the pillars of civilization can shatter beneath one man's unbridled dominion. To plumb the rancid roots of Caligula's monstrosity, we must dig into the poisoned earth that birthed this venomous bloom. Gaius entered the world in the viper's nest of the Julio-Claudian dynasty, where betrayal was breath and ambition a blade in the dark. His great-grandfather Augustus had clawed the principate from chaos with a surgeon's cunning and a tyrant's lash. His grandfather Tiberius gripped the throne in a stranglehold of dread and delusion, while his father Germanicus, idolized by the ranks for his valor, likely met his end in a cup of poison, his fame too bright a threat to dimming eyes. The moniker, Caligula, Little Soldier's Boot, stuck from his boyhood romps amid his father's legions on the savage Rhine frontier, where grizzled troops cooed over the taut in tiny armor, stomping in step with scarred conquerors. Those tender years, steeped in the raw roar of war and Rome's offhand gore, would fester into an adult fixation on the arena's crimson ballet and the spectacle of public agony. The wide-eyed lad who once melted battle-forged hearts hardened into a friend who savored suffering like fine vintage, his grins widening with every dying gasp. His ascent was a charnel path strewn with kin's bones. In Tiberius's twilight grip of suspicion, rivals toppled like wheat. Caligula's mother Agrippina the Elder was banished to wither in starvation's jaws, his brothers Nero and Drusus chained and crushed in shadowed cells. Only the boy's feigned fragility, his coltish frame, his flair for idle pageantry, spared him the noose, painting him as no thorn in the old fox's paw. Tiberius snarled he was cradling a serpent for Rome's doom, a curse that slithered into bloody prophecy. When the emperor wheezed his last in 37 AD, perhaps choked by Caligula's own hand, if whispers hold, the youth claimed a realm sprawling from misty Britannia to sun-scorched Egypt, from Iberian crags to Syrian sands. The Senate, battered raw by Tiberius's whip, flung open their arms in fevered acclaim, blind to the fangs of the fiend they now embraced, a sadist whose hunger for pain would render his uncle a doting uncle by comparison. Early days. Caligula's dawn as emperor shimmered with dawn's false gold, teasing a renaissance for the eternal city. He showered the Praetorian Guard, urban watch, and fire watch cohorts with fat purses from his forebears' hordes, forging chains of silver loyalty. Exiles streamed home, cells yawned empty, and the empire's ledgers unfurled for the plebs' gaze, acts that ignited adoration from marble halls to muddy alleys. Rome, parched for light after Tiberius's endless gloam, hurled itself at their golden boy's feet in rapture verging on the divine. He unleashed chariot thunder and gladiatorial gales, his coffers bleeding for spectacles that left jaws slack and eyes wide. Arenas drowned in gore as beasts from empire's fringes, lions from Libya, tigers from the Indus, tore into oblivion for the mob's roar, while peerless swordsmen carved epics in blood from cockcrow to crepuscule. Caligula lorded over it all with a glee that bordered on rapture, his peals of mirth rebounding off stone as warriors crumpled for his sport. What the throng hailed as princely bounty was, in truth, the sly unveiling of his venomous tryst with agony and oblivion. In this idol's glow, he nodded off Tiberius's dangling monuments and sparked fresh labor that fed thousands from the dole. He breathed life into Pompey's faded playhouse, reared a gleaming new Colosseum, triumphs of Roman grit that cloaked the storm brewing in his breast. Envoys from afar hailed a sharp mind and honeyed tongue, deft beyond his green years. Yet even then, the keen-eyed caught flickers of fracture, his guffaws in the bloodied pit rang too wild, too true, echoing long after the crowd's hush. His gaze chased crimson rivulets soaking the sand, and whispers slithered from palace shadows of midnight prowls through forsaken stands, where he'd paced the ghosts of fresh slain shades. Madness's tendrils were coiling tight, fed by power's heady elixir, a brew that burned restraint to ash. 8 months in, calamity crashed, a spectral fever gripped him, the pivot from heir apparent to history's hydra. Scribes of old sketch a plague of phantoms, seizures, visions, that today's healers puzzle over as encephalitis's blaze or epilepsy's temporal storm. Its core eludes us still, a riddle wrapped in antiquity's veil. But the husk that rose from fever's forge was no longer kin to the man who'd fallen, as if the blaze had seared clean the last embers of mercy in his core. Suetonius scribes how Rome's folk, frantic for their idol, kept anguished vigils at the palace gates, some pledging their breath to the immortals for his breath's return. The gods just twisted cruel, they spared him, only to curse the world with what slunk forth, leaving those same supplicants to beg for his blood months hence. Palace shadows stirred at once with the shift, his timbre turned a rasp like gravel under boot, grating on the ear. His stare sharpened to a blade that pierced souls, not met eyes. He raved of celestial chats, Jupiter's thunder in his ear, visions of heavens we've denied to clay-bound kin. These revelations would cloak his foulest frenzies and his climb to self-made godhead. The scourge unlocked a ravenous thirst for torment, leaping past the noble's shrug at pain. Once, he'd mirrored the elite's cool disdain for the wretched, now, he hunted slights like prey, crafting torments with an artist's fever, reveling in their baroque bite as keenly as the snap of bone. Scholars murmur of cerebral ruin, empathy's circuits fried while wit endured, a perfect storm for empire's fall. The fracture's first fracture cracked in barbs at his inner circle. He shattered his darling Drusilla from her vows, dragging her to his bed in a taboo blaze that scorched even Rome's lax morals. Her bolt from life in 38 AD birthed a goddess from her prayer, to doubt her halo was to court the axe. He wailed for months, edict turning mirth, ablution, or hearthside cheer to felonies, blocked their wage. Paranoia's fangs sank deep, plots bloomed in every glance. Marcus Junius Silanus, a silver-haired pillar of the Curia and shadow rival, was harried to the blade on a dream's whim. Caligula spat that the elder loomed dire in his slumber, a oracle's demand for crimson. Thus dawned the dread decree, any phantom in his night frights faced dawn's steel salute. His senate bonds frayed to fury as god-mania swelled. He'd struck before them as Pantheon parade, Jupiter's fake thunder, Neptune's pronged sneer, Venus in silks and rouge, bidding them grovel, lips to toe, for speech's grace. A stutter's pause sealed fates, estate seized to slake his gold-guzzling whims. His tempers were tempests untamed, a feast might frolic in jest and pomp till lightning struck, a guest's imagined sneer birthing the headsman's call. Revelers mastered the mask, chortle at his quips, brace for the blade, while the court turned Colosseum, where a twitch spelled doom and hush cut as keen as cry. His god fever peaked in thunderclaps of hubris, blood of Jove in his veins, worship due a breathing idol. Statues of his sneer supplanted shrines saints across the map, altars demanded his due in smoke and chant, zeal's shortfall a swift end. Emperor and eternal blurred in his delirium's haze. As the vortex tightened, his entourage devolved to a bacchanal of flesh and fury, a riot that gagged even decadence's devotees. He decreed debauches where lust tangled with laceration, compelling togaed lords and their ladies to writhe under his throne's gaze, fates dangling on his whim's thread. No mere revels, these, pageants of pulverized pride, dignity dashed for his dark delight. His carnal chaos scorned rank or restraint. He'd haul wedded dames to his lair, ravage them before their lords, then dissect their yields like a critic at verse, pitting them 'gainst harlots of lore. Suetonius scribes feasts where he'd paw wives like chattel, then parade the husbands through his conquests play-by-play, compelling grins or the grave. Lust's leash stretched to abyssal fringes, appall even his sybarites. A harem of hirelings, male, female, fed his fires, but he preyed on noble blood, youths in senatorial purple bent as toys, spouses and spawn claimed as crown's playthings. The palace pulsed as pleasure den, elites enslaved in silk and shame. Sexual depravity. His sister's bond burned past Rome's bendy codes. Drusilla, his queen, was but the blaze's heart, hints linger of Agrippina the younger and Julia Livilla in his grasp, groped at galas, pimped as prizes to envoys and fat cats, flaunting his family's fall. His suppers swelled to sinkholes of shame, feasts fusing with frenzy till lines liquefied. Guests groveled in graduated grotesqueries, climax a coin's toss twixt breath and bust. He'd bear doddering patricians for slave youth romps mid-morsel, mandating gaze and join the ghosts. He wove carnal cults, dubbing defilements divine dues, rape a rite, outrage an oblation. Dames bowed to his shaft as relic, lords knelt in communions, crouch. Blasphemies brew sanctified savagery. Childhood's bloom drew his foulest gaze, senators and knights' blooms, scarce bloomed, borne to his bed, sires and dams chained to witness and whimper thanks for the blessing. Youth's purity. Just another pale to paint black in his moral massacre. Sadism's symphony sang in scripted shames, doomed dads beheld brides and bloodkin broken before the blade's kiss, violation's vicious herald. Disobedient dames didn't merely perish, they were peeled in prolonged perversions, wails weaving warnings through vaulted vaults. Arenas art under him spiked to sadistic symphonies, sex stitched to slaughter. He'd hurl highborns bare to the beast's bed, gladiators gang as foreplay, when felons flagged, he'd cherry-pick crowds for carnal cull before the cat's feast. The Colosseum, Rome's proud pinnacle, warped to violations vaudeville, where plebs paid for peril in flesh and finality. Caligula's carnage ran on ransacked riches, the treasury's throat slit to slake his spree. In year 1, he'd torched Tiberius's tidy 2 billion sesterces stash on frolics, feasts, and follies to gild his god self. Funds fled, he flayed the folk with fiscal frenzy, courting crash. He dusted off treason's tribunal from Tiberius's terror, but flipped for filthy lucre, fat-pursed folk framed for phantom profanations, gainst his sacred skin, holdings harvested pre-hack or hurled to hinterlands. Wealth. A warrant in his world. He hatched a horde of hallucinatory halls, writs, weddings, splits stung, then strumpets, stakes, even the luxury of lip-sealed orations. To gasp his heir. A tariff, default a dagger's date. Rome's realm of raid and road, ripe for ruin, gnawed itself to gorge one glutton's gorge on guilt and gore. Madness as mirror gleamed in Incitatus's rise, his prized pony, purple-draped in marble muse with ivory trough and minion maids, dubbed consul, Rome's civic crown on a beast's brow. Eccentric? Nay, a nose-thumbing at the togaed tribe, senators sunk below stock. Hubris hurled him at heaven's defying builds, a bay of body span, 3 miles of madness, just to strut in Alexander's cuirass, outdoing the Hellespont stride. It gulped gold and ghosts in gale, ditched on a dime's disinterest. Such idiocies infested the imperium, whims devouring domains. The palace under him pulsed as panic's labyrinth, courtiers threading terror's maze on mood's mercurial map. Each hall hid havoc, each chat a potential curtain call. Staff spun a web of winks and whispers to gauge his gale, but tempests toppled tricks. His chambers crammed cruel contraptions cheek by jowl with art's apogee, a macabre mash mirroring his mangled mind. Guests gaped at iron virgins flanking Venus's vein, racks ranked as relics in gilt gossamer glow. He'd croon their calculus to callers, relishing recounts of ravaged rogues. Dawn's rite was ritualized ruin, a sadist stagecraft to spike the air with dread. Morning levies lurched from largesse to lethal on whims, a plea prized or pulverized by toga's tint, timbre's twang, or face's fleeting frown. They morphed to melees for mere mortality, citizens sparring for survival's scrap. Beds banked his boudoir, each for ethereal guests in dream's domain, guards gleaned godly gabble through walls, manic mirth or midnight shrieks. Daybreak doled dream-damning decrees, slumbers spawned slain. Kitchens kin to his kink, he'd shove supper from divine dainties, man-flesh feigned or foul, claiming God's gourmet. Cannibal's curse or con, it crushed the spirit, forging elites into eaters of echoes amid orchestrated outrage. The triclinium, talk's temple, twisted to tomb's antechamber, every course a crapshoot with Sharon. Caligula's legions unveiled his unhinged core, power's poison perverting prudence. No werewolf he, yet he held history's helm, launching larks masquerading as marches. His 39 AD German gambit gasped with grotesquerie, unnerving even ironclad aides, troops tasked to tally tidal trinkets from Gallic strands, Neptune's booty boxed for Rome's boast, gainst the waves. Veterans of verity's vein, they choked on the clownery while he crowed conquest of currents and cosmos. The ranks reeled, oaths to an oracle of oddity, flight fatal for folk and fold. He hazed brass with base bids, centurions crawled caked in clay under his litter's leer, seniors sprinted chariot side till spent, slackers skewered for sloth. The force of fealty and fire fractured under one fool's froth. God talked tainted tactics, he'd freeze phalanxes for phantom parleys, ranks rigid as he rambled with voids, hours hemorrhaged, doubters doomed. Armies atrophied when the apex chased celestials o'er stratagems. Britannia's bid buckled at brink, he bailed on Neptune's, nay, to the narrow sea, dubbing dominion dun sand soil's kiss, parading phantom palms in pomp. Rome's rabble, craving credence, cheered the charade, suspicion simmering beneath. By 41 AD, his horror's harvest had his inner ring at rupture's rim. Praetorians, once kin's shield, soured to slaughter slaves, their code cracked by caprice's cruelty. Oaths to crown curdled to curse menace more than marauders abroad. Cassius Dio, grizzled tribune, forged the fray, Caligula's jabs at his falsetto, watchwords of Priapus and priestess to prick a soldier's pride, fused with felony's full measure to steel his spine for regicide. The cabal knit senators, knights, freed souls, all scarred by his scattershot scourge. No faction's flag, just flesh's flight, while he drew breath, dread's diced all. Unity's unlikely forge. His horror's heat, melting classes in mutual melt. The spark spat at Palatine's play in January's chill, he vowed Alexandria's exile for unchecked adoration, sans Rome's reigns, and a senatorial slaughter to seat incitants and ilk, Republic's requiem rung. Plotters pounced, delay meant doom's devouring. They sink to shift's shadow, scouting the sub-palace squeeze where Teutonic teeth couldn't tear. Precision's prose, Praetorian purity prized patria o'er prince. January 24, 41 AD, Palatine's pageant closed with stage stabbings he savored, blind to blades sharpening in gloom. His guards glimpsed guards' unease, but God's self scoffed at peril. Lunch lured him through the fatal funnel, king cut off. Chariot's crew lurked lethal, steel singing as he stepped sole. Fury's flood fell him, chariots slash sheared jaw and jugular, kin carving till carcass cooled in congealing curse. Suetonius tallies 30 lashes of loathing, each a ledger of lost lives. His last rasp. Yet I live. God claim gasping, crushed by clay's cold kiss. Assassin's echo exposed empire's palsy, Senate quaked, not in jubilee but jolt, dreading German reprisals' red rain. Praetorian split, slayers versus king-clingers, hours hinging on havoc's hinge, succession a scramble skirting strife. Plot's punch lacked punchline, courting chaos. Claudius's curtain crouch clinched it, guards grasped the gawky kin as crown, panic's pick proving providence's ploy. He mended the maelstrom, stitching sanity to a realm rent by rage's romp. The tyrant toppled, but tetanus lingered, wounds weeping for generations. His four-year flay flayed the facade, Rome's rock-ribbed rights revealed as rice paper frail under folly's foot. The cabal's coup-crowned courage's quiet roar against oppression's onslaught, power's paper-thin pretense pierced. Scribes of your grappled the gore, Suetonius, seasoned sundered from the slaughter, still staggered at sadism's scope, Tacitus turned the terror to toxin against autocrats' abyss. Not freak alone, but flare, when wards wane, one soul's sway spells shatter. Rome's ritual rub, darnation memorial, senate stab at amnesia, statues smashed, scrolls scarred, scrolls scrubbed of the scourge. Yet erasure's effort etched eternity, the zeal to zap betrayed the zombie it birthed. Now's nerds noodle his noodle, epilepsy's electric, bipolar's blizzard, or power's pure psychosis. Undebated, his hurricane hurled how fast the haughty house of man hurtles to hell under hollow helm's hand. Rome reeled but rallied, scarred by the stark, such shade stalk any seat of sway. Caligula's echo haunts history's hall, the honeymoon haze to paranoia's pyre, spectacle's snare for sway, safeguard sabotage, fear's frail throne o'er fealty. Tyrant's template, timeless and tremor-inducing. He hammers home, evil's ember endures, unbound by border, blood, or bygone, leashed lone by lexicon, lore, and lions who roar gainst the rift. This saga stabs at shadows we shun, power's peril, virtue's vice, soul's sly slide. Civility? No cradle cry, but conquest craved, guarded grim. When dignity's diced for delight, restraint rent, soul's stuff for sport, we glimpse the gears that ground gayest to ghoul. Caligula cries, watch wakeful, lest the wheel whirl wild where wielders warp the weak.